want to improve in the Marshall attack? In this video, FoxTrainer will inspire you, showing you the origin of the mighty Gambit. Capablanca vs. Marshall, 1918.
Hi everyone, let's have a look at this famous game. Capablanca vs. Marshall, 1918. Long time ago it is. Roy Lopez on the board. And these two players have played each other so many times, and Frank Marshall has tried a lot of stuff against e4 and with e5. But this time around he had something very special prepared, and as we've mentioned in our first video, Black has delayed pawn to d6. Now he has the opportunity to uncork his novelty at the time, pawn to d5. And after captures, Capablanca of course couldn't resist going for this juicy pawn over there. He captured. They did some trades, and of course Black is now down a pawn, but happily so. And again, in our first video we explained a bit what's going on, and here we'll see more of it. In this video, and in this particular game, Frank played knight to f6. So this was the original way of playing this Marshall Gambit slash, or aka, Marshall attack. So this opening is so aggressive, and Frank Marshall was known for his aggressive play that they even dubbed this opening with the black pieces an attack. Usually, a black opening has the name of a defense and a white with attack, but this one was dubbed the Marshall attack in a lot of places. So, after knight f6, Capablanca immediately played rook to e1, bishop d6, and he sensed the danger and played pawn to h3. So, one could also expect white to play a move like d4, since if you look at his queenside pieces, they need to get out, of course, right? And the knight cannot get out, the bishop cannot get out, so d4 is a very logical move. But in this case, Capablanca was probably looking at knight g4 and thinking that, okay, here we go, this is exactly up Marshall's alley. So instead, he played pawn to h3, but woohoo, knight g4 anyways. So now the question is, to take or not to take? And Capablanca decided to play the solid queen to f3, getting another piece close to the king to make the king feel more secure. Of course, we are kind of eyeing the rook over there, but more importantly, he wants to keep his king safe. What would have happened if white had captured? You might have guessed it already, queen h4, with the idea of jumping in, and a long line of complications could start here. And I think it's already extremely difficult for white to even think about surviving for the next few moves. But instead, we see a brilliant bishop sacrifice, opening up the e-file, rook to e1, and so many problems. Whose king wants to march out like this? After rook e6 and bishop e7, there are just too many threats on the board. For instance, queen d1, that is mate. Coming back to the game, after knight f6 and h3 and knight g4, remember Capablanca played queen f3, queen to h4. Marshall does not want to turn around, he's going forward. Pawn to d4, and bam! Knight takes f2. Whew, it's hard to keep up with this guy. So knight takes f2, to take or not to take? That is the question. So Capablanca yet again restrained himself and played rook to e2. Was it possible to capture on f2? Maybe it was, but of course there seems to be a devilish continuation here for black. Pause the video and see if you can find it. Okay, did you find bishop h2 check? The king of course cannot capture the bishop as the king needs to protect his queen. King f1, bishop g3 with the skewer. Queen d2 seems to be the best. And after bishop f5, a lot of pressure. As you can see, the valuation bar is tending a bit towards white, but a lot of difficulties that needs to be addressed. In fact, after a move, an innocent move like queen e2, black is already in a fantastic position after rook a to e8. And if white wants to checkmate, he will get checkmated in turn pretty soon afterwards. Right, so a lot of danger yet again. And if we go back to our starting point with knight f6, knight g4, queen f3, takes, Capablanca played rook e2, bishop g4. My goodness, I think a lot of people might actually lose weight from playing against Frank Marshall, all the sweating. So pawn takes, check, king f1, bishop g3, asking to allow the checkmate. Of course, white had to give up the rook this time. And after all these complications, Capablanca, of course, didn't want to capture this bishop over there, let's say with the king, because queen takes c1, and there are problems. But after all the complications, it seems like white is actually doing good now. White having the two pieces for the rook. And maybe, if he can survive with his king, just be winning. Bishop h4. Of course, white wants to trade queens. King boldly steps to d3. King goes to c2. And black is going to try and keep as many pieces on the board as possible. Bishop d5, good move. Black wants to open up the position. And here Capablanca finds a brilliant way of untangling his pieces over here. The knight, of course, wants to get out, but there's an awful pin. So, what to do over here? Pawn to b4 was played, the bishop moved, and voila! The rook and a1 suddenly gets an opportunity to enter the game. And now it seems like the knight on b1 is an excellent defender, and he's okay being at home for now. Black desperately tried to open up the position and complicate matters, but alas, playing against the famous world champion Capablanca, always a difficult task. And after white pushed his pawn and kept his king safe, few moves later, he forced his opponent to resign. After bishop takes f7. What a blow! If rook takes f7, of course we have queen and checkmate soon to follow. Okay, so unfortunately for Frank, it didn't work out that well for his first attempt at the Frank Marshall Gambit, right? Or Marshall attack. But we certainly did see Jose Raul Capablanca, famous world champion, even struggling for a long time and having to settle for defending for quite a while. Of course, later on, years back, and later on after this game, years after this game, instead of knight f6, the modern day grandmasters, with the help of computers of course, realized that pawn to c6 might actually be a better attempt. And with the same idea of bishop d6. So after something like d4, bishop d6, rook back, queen h4, threatening, queen takes h2, and this over there, we have the start of the very, very famous and well-known line in the Marshall attack. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next videos, we will look at some example games of this modern way of playing the Marshall attack. And of course, we'll have to have a look at some attempts by white to avoid the Marshall attack by means of some anti-Marshall moves. So, I'm FoxTrainer. Don't forget to punch that subscribe button, and I'll see you for the next time. Keep on training. See ya.